Hello and welcome to the Paper Prototypes podcast. I'm Rex and I'm here with my guest today, Ian. And Ian is one of the devs behind Kickbastards. So, Ian, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got started in game development, and then tell me a little bit about Kickbastards?
Right. So how did I get started in game dev? I guess a few years ago I just started messing around with Unreal Engine and started making games. And that's basically it. I've just kind of been messing around since then. It's not anything particularly exciting, I must admit. I'll tell you a bit about Kickbusters, though. That's a bit more exciting because that's my main kind of game project I've been working on for a couple of years, and we released it this year. It's a kind of first person parkour game that's inspired by games like Mirror's Edge and Cluster Trucks and other first person parkour games. And it's the main twist on that is that you just kick a lot of stuff. That's basically it.
And what inspired you to make Kickbastards and its moveset?
Um, The game comes from kind of a weird origin, I would say, to be honest. A while ago, just before I started making it, I was messing around with some prototypes, and I made this honestly, it was barely even a prototype of a game. I just made a little thing where you could kick a guy off just off like some basic cubes or something. It was like a really bad looking kick animation and everything. But I posted it on Reddit just because I was like, I want to see if anyone vibes with this, and it got honestly way too many upvotes for the quality of the content that I posted. I was like, okay, no, I'm not just the only one who loves a good kick in a game. So I was like, okay, that's a good sign. I'll continue with this prototype because I had been messing around with a couple other things at the time, but they weren't doing as well, I don't think. So yeah, basically then I was like, okay, I want to make a game about a kick, and I'm personally one of my hobbies is doing parkour, so I've kind of always kind of vaguely wanted to make a parkour game, and after a bit of messing around, I was like, oh yeah, there's something to this. I could do like a movement game where you have like a focus on kicking. Um, it wasn't like this grand idea that I originally had. Like it just kind of all came together as I was working on it, I would say. But it just kind of felt right, and like other people were vibing with it, and I was like, yeah, I think this could work. Um, Felt like I lost track of what the question was there, but
No, I'm kind of. So you're into parkour?
yeah. I've been doing it for how long have I been doing it for? 10 years now, something like that.
Oh, wow, that's incredible. Okay.
It's a bit of a weird niche kind of thing to do, but
Well, I
it's
will
good fun,
say,
you know.
I will say I've been following you on Twitter for a little bit, or at least I've been following your game. All I saw was just that one kick where you fly a skeleton off in the sunset, and I'm like, that's it. I'm following this one. I want to see where this goes.
Yeah. I
uh,
think I very early on, I realized that you could just in games you can just do whatever you want. Like, why have a realistic kick when you could just launch things into the distance? And it's still to this day it happens. It makes me laugh. So I know it's the right move to have done.
so when you started developing Kickbastards, this game seems to be have a strong focus on speed running as well as as being an element. Did you set out to make a game that was going to have speed running be a strong part of it, or is that something that slowly came into its development?
Um, so Kickbastards originally was a slightly different game before we kind of moved into this kind of this kind of speedrunning kind of time trial version of the game it is now. Originally, it had been a sort of arena combat game. So back then, I hadn't been thinking about the kind of speedrunning element at all, really, to be honest. Um, but that version of the game wasn't really working out. It kind of just, it always just felt like there wasn't enough variety in the combat, but just with the kicks, at least not kind of with the where I wanted you to be also moving around the map. It just hadn't panned out. But then I was thinking about the game quite a bit during that time because I kind of knew it wasn't quite right. And I was like, okay, no, actually, I should just do this kind of more linear-ish kind of time trial thing. And from then on, definitely speedrunning was like 100% a part of the design and a thought for a lot of the design decisions that came out of that. A lot of the movement, specifically the movement tech, is kind of designed in a way to facilitate kind of different levels of skill. Um, Specifically, there's like a lot of a lot of the tech's kind of got that's fairly easy to do, so you can kind of onboard people with it. And then as they build skills, they can kind of go back and replay the maps and try and go faster and faster. So, for example, like doing a wall run in the game is really straightforward. You just jump out a wall and it just kind of happens. There's not really any too much technical skill to that. But there are some other moves like uh, there's the backwards wall kick in the game, which is tutorialized a little bit later on, which is reasonably easy to do in certain circumstances, but the more you learn about it, you can use it to like combine it with other moves and start to get loads and loads of speed. Um, and there's like kind of the way it's all there's kind of like a technical level about the way this is all implemented, that we try to make it so it isn't just like it it is very kind of reactive to the kind of the speed you built up to the place you use it in the environment. So you can kind of there's a layer of depth on top of just kind of using the mechanics or just knowing how to kind of do the basics, I guess.
And what was the reasoning behind wanting to slowly onboard? What was your thought process behind slowly onboarding the players with some of these mechanics?
So it's kind of twofold. One is I kind of didn't want the game to just be for kind of really hardcore players or people who are kind of familiar with other movement games. I did want kind of people to be able to get in and have fun with it, even if they never quite reach that high level of skill. I think there's kind of a fun, even a low level of skill, and just getting to like a medium level of skill. Um, so that's kind of part of it. There's like progressing as a player is fun. So wherever you get on at the scale of the game, even if you're like you come in and you're like really good at these games, there's like nuance and depth that is only in my game. So you'd have to learn the nuances of this specific game to kind of be the best at it. So the value of having this range of like um skill and being able to build it up for different players as you go through the game at kind of different rates as well. It's something that makes the game better for basically everyone who plays the game. Um, it's it takes quite a bit of like thought to like make sure you're like spacing things out right. I think one thing that's potentially in the game at the moment is probably a little bit weaker is there are quite a lot of kind of unique mechanics in the game. Um, and so the tutorialization is a little bit like heavy-handed. It would be nice to be able to have like space that out a bit more. But I think because a lot of these mechanics are kind of necessary to enjoying the game, it ends up kind of getting front loaded a bit. But I think we do. There's kind of if you kind of as you play, kind of think about them, the way the levels are designed, they kind of encourage you to use them a little bit more. Some of these skills as you go, or at least I would hope that's the case. Maybe some players don't ever engage fully with them, all the mechanics, but even still, they will hopefully be able to like engage with more as they go along.
And how did you design a lot of the levels for the game?
Um, so I had like a loose philosophy for it, although admittedly it took me a little bit of time to settle on it. And I actually, had made a bunch of levels and then went back and like kind of redid them once I kind of like by building the levels, it kind of I figured this kind of philosophy out as I was going, which is I found that generally players reacted well when I was playtesting to having one kind of main route in the level and then having offshoots. Usually I would do so there's like a main route and then there's a kind of secondary route. So the main route usually would get you in the game there are kind of medals, silver, gold, and platinum. So you could get the gold medal by going on the main route. And there was always like a trick kind of special route that maybe you'd have to use a little bit more skill to use. That was usually reasonably obvious, I'd say. Sometimes it varies. Some of them are really obvious. Some of them you have to like think a little bit about to find. Um, so that kind of gives you kind of like a easy onboarding to as a player to exploring the level. And then on top of that, I would layer in like smaller kind of tricks or little mini adjustments to said route. Sometimes there'd be like an additional third route. Kind of depends on the level. But usually, if you kind of that kind of means that the levels then strike a balance between kind of clarity and long-term depth and kind of an exploration of where you want to exploration for players who are better and want to engage with the levels of it a or any level a bit more. I think on top of that, that's kind of like the basic kind of philosophy that I try to approach most of the levels with. There are a couple like levels that are a bit different because we have a couple like I would say gimmick levels that are a bit different because either there's one level that's like just a straight up joke level, which is the frog level in it.
Oh
But
yes, I
that was
remember that.
so that one doesn't really follow any of the rules because I was just like, fuck it, I want to I saw a model of a frog and I was like, I want to put that in my game. So that's literally the only reason. Um, but apart from that, usually when I'm actually then going to like make an individual level, um, I obviously use that philosophy, but I tend to start from a point of what kind of either have a piece of I don't know what's the right word, like content that I want to build a level around. So, for example, some of them like the buses in the game, or there are the skeleton foots that raise and lower. So I might be like, well, I want to come up with something fun to do with one of those things, or is there a combination of those things, or is there like what could I it's usually like a little kernel of an idea that then gets expanded, and I'd mess around with that idea and be like, well, actually, there's something fun about, for example, doing a wall run and then having to jump onto a bus. Um, and it's then how can you expand and play around with that mechanic to produce a whole level? And each level, for the most part, is an expression of a different idea. There are some where it's just like I've been because I've made these levels over I don't know how long, quite a long time. That I just have a random idea and I'd be like, oh, that probably could be quite fun, and it's kind of like a different process, but for the most part, that's how I did it.
You have a lot of different themes depending on where the story takes you. So you start in hell, end up in, uh, I guess, broken dimension, and
Yeah.
then one of the themes seems to be Mirror's Edge, dystopian, with a lot of yellow and white. Do you think your level would have survived, should have survived the yellow paint discourse that was going on Twitter a little while ago?
um, I think what's funny about that for me is that my game almost explicitly uses the yellow paint in kind of a very like on the nose way, I would say. I don't want to say it's like a joke or anything like that because it is like a serious use of it, but it's almost like taking that yellow paint concept, which is from Mirror's Edge with their red highlighting, like 100%. It took that and then was like, well, what happens if we put that and just make it into the art style of set of the levels? So Hell is uses like orange basically as the yellow paint, and then the Apocalypse just uses yellow as the yellow paint. Um, but it's like kind of very intentional, and like again in the levels, like I kind of don't even worry about like the yellow paint discourse. You'll see there's big arrows over the place showing you where to go. I just think because the game's so arcadey and because it is the art style, I get away with it. Where AAA games where it's like almost like a realistic art style and then yellow just randomly sprayed all over the place. they don't get away with it as much.
I think it's also the speed of which the game plays, because there are some levels where I would kick off someone and immediately think, where the fuck am I going next? See the yellow and go, there, and I would just start climbing in a direction. So
A
the
a
yellow
hun-
does help a lot.
100%. That's definitely something I like noticed like very early on, like when I was like doing play tests just like a couple of years ago on the game. I was like, yeah, this game is quick, and when you're playing it for the first time, you don't really have time to take in the level. So you're kind of learning the level at high speed as you go. So having a moment where you're like, I don't know where I'm going, kind of sucks. So it's almost better to know where you're going, even if it's a bit of a ridiculous big yellow arrow showing you where that is. It makes the game just more fun because the fantasy of the game is doing like these cool parkour runs, not exploring the world. Um, so to fulfill that fantasy, it's better to be slightly heavy-handed rather than underdoing it, I would say.
And were you into speedrunning before you developed this game, or have you slowly gotten more into it?
I would say I've never been a speedrunner myself, or not much of one. I think speedrunning like a full game for me is just a bit much. I don't think I have the I don't know, just like gaming stamina to like play for like a couple hours, like high intensity. Like I struggle with that a bit. So I think I've never really 100% got into it myself. There are like some exceptions, uh, like I distinctly remember in Call of Duty 4, they had that tutorial level where they had a timer on it, and I swear, I played that like 1,000 times, even though it's like a 15-second bit of the game. Like it's not even like the interesting part of the game. So it's definitely been something I'm interested in and know that I enjoy. And but weirdly, like making this game wasn't like, oh, I want to make a speedrunning game, but it has made me more into it as I've made it because I've gotten into speedrunning my own game. In fact, like I even like tried. I hadn't tried Neon White until actually after release, but after playing that, I was like, no, I'm into this as well now. Whereas I'm not sure how much I would have been into it beforehand. I don't know. It's just one of those things, you know. I think as a game developer, sometimes when you're making games, you don't necessarily always make the game you're wanting to play, or like or the genre that is like your favorite genre. I think I personally find that when I actually tackle something that's maybe a little bit out of what I would normally play myself, or other games I've made, say, I usually find a lot of fun in exploring that and then kind of getting into it as I go. Um, it's happened to me with like a couple other kind of smaller games I've made as well, where I've kind of thought, oh, I want to make a game, maybe played some other games for inspiration, then and kind of got into a genre or a kind of style of game a lot more um, than I kind of would otherwise do.
That's really interesting because a lot of the devs I interview, they sort of like already have they're like, I really love platformers, so I'm making a platformer, and that was my inspiration. So,
Yeah, maybe I'm a bit weird like that. I definitely think it's in my head. I think maybe I get a bit. I'm quite maybe up myself with designing. I'm like, ah, yes, I want to be the best designer in the world. I want to challenge myself. Um, so I think for me, taking on a game that's exact like say like a similar game. So if I was to make Kick Bastards 2, that honestly doesn't really excite me very much. Or even if it wasn't Kick Bastards 2, to make another speedrunning game, for example, I think I've learned most of what I would need to know there. Every game you make, you learn more as you go, even regardless. Like I'm sure, like there's people who make, say a platformer, they only make platformers, even if they're the same type of platformer. There's always something you don't know, and there's always something you always learn about the game you're making as you're making it. So there's stuff about Kick Bastards that is unique to Kick Bastards. I need to learn that as I make it. So that's always an interesting challenge anyway. Um, but for me, I'm always a bit like, yeah, I don't know. I want to take on a new genre or like, I don't know how this works. I want to try that.
Do you feel that taking on a genre that maybe you're unfamiliar with might hinder the development process because you're unaware of some of the conventions that are used in that genre? Or do you think that gives you an advantage because you can think about that type of game from a new perspective?
Uh, I would say it's probably both, to be honest. It's something I have thought about before. Specifically, one thing I've like thought about is one type of genre I've thought about. Like I've sometimes think about making a horror game, or like going deep on that. But I honestly never play them. I think there's something to being able to come at it from a new angle that you're not kind of rehashing similar ideas that other people have already made. I think a good approach to it, to be honest, would be to start a project maybe a bit clueless, but then as you kind of got a little bit into it, then to actually just go and play the other games so you don't end up in a cycle of just having to spend months on learning what you need to know to come to the same design decision that everyone else has already made and you could have answered by just playing a game 3 months ago. I think there's definitely some genre conventions as well that you need to know because that's what players expect and players will be confused. For example, I mean, this is a dumb one, but if you're making first person shooters and you want an explosive barrel, if you never played any, you didn't know about the explosive barrel thing, you made it green, and everyone's like, oh, I just don't shoot the barrel, it's just a random barrel. But you're like, no, why does no one know about it? But if you just played, you know that everyone knows what a red barrel looks like. I think there's a lot of like that kind of language there's in the genre that you do just genuinely need to play some of them to figure that out.
Yeah, I've always been fascinated by outsider art by people who are like, I've never made a movie before. Let's fucking go. Because that just sounds insane to me. Like I know that's how we got Shenmue as the developer, I believe, the first game hadn't made games. He doesn't play games, but he wanted to
Right.
make them and created a groundbreaking game. On the other hand, apparently the devs behind Anthem were like, we don't want to look at Destiny 2, even though that was the big looter shooter of the year and Anthem didn't end up well. But like
Right.
the tricky thing about video games is because someone has to play through your game. There is like, yeah, that language you were talking about, especially with like bring up the explosive barrels, that like gamers kind of need to pick up to intuit how to progress through your game that isn't there with like, let's say, like a painting in a certain genre or a movie in a certain genre.
I think there's like I think that the point where you need to do it is when it's like part of the genre and not something that's unique to another game. So with the Anthem devs avoiding Destiny, if they played other games that were like Destiny, but didn't want to play Destiny specifically, I think potentially they could have um, got away with it. Because there are, for me, I think about in Kick Bastards, I did specifically avoid playing Neon White because I was like, it's a really it's like maybe not a really similar game, but it's like it's right there. I did play other games in the genre, um, mainly because I didn't want to be like, well, Neon White's like the best designed one. I'll just take all their design decisions. Um, but as a compromise, I did watch a couple of videos on it. Um, so I kind of had a vague idea of what it was about and if there was anything that like was obvious stuff I should learn from it. I think that's probably the best way to go about it. I think if you're approaching it with thought and care and making decisions that make sense for the project you're working on, you'll more than likely come out in the right space. I think it's when you go into it without any thought at all that you end up making a big mistake and just either wasting time or confusing your players.
Yeah, not to say that is what the Anthem devs did. I don't want to because there are a lot of other development issues, about that. I just don't want to dismiss
Yeah,
all their
yeah.
work. Yeah.
No, no, and I haven't played it, but from the looks of it, or at least there's obviously a lot of dev work in that game that is good. Like, I don't know, the art and stuff like that is obviously great in that game. Um, so it's hard to say.
So, I also through this podcast end up playing a lot of games that I would never play. And then I end up being like, oh wow, this is a genre that potentially I like. Um, and so I don't know a lot about speedrunning games because I myself am also I just don't have the attention span always. I think some of the people in the speedrunning community are psychos. Like I saw someone, they're like, I'm gonna speedrun RuneScape, just the whole ass game. I'm like, you are crazy. Don't do that. That's gonna kill yourself. But have fun. Um, what was the point of this question? Right, so you have a lot of design conventions that I've noticed from other games like Neon White, where like you don't get the leaderboard until you get the gold medal, or you don't get there are certain hidden mechanics that you learn by picking up the collectibles in your levels. Is that something that you borrowed from other games, or is that just something that
Uh,
you developed organically as well, like almost parallel to another game without realizing it?
the leaderboards one is specifically that is 100% just taken from Neon White. Uh, I think the stuff I took from Neon White specifically was mainly a bit about like that results screen a bit. Um, Although I don't think there's actually much more. It was mainly just that lead because we don't. They have like a whole insight. I don't know. Have you played the game? It's got like a whole insight system anyway,
Oh,
where
I
you
watched like a few video
where you
essays because I was like, fascinating. Never gonna play this, but fascinating.
right. Yeah. So as you kind of in that game, as you I guess do better, like get better times. Get I think it's just based on the medals actually. You get insight, which kind of unlocks certain things. I didn't really want to do that for my game. I didn't feel quite right. I think they've got like a whole other meta layer of their narrative and stuff on top of it that I think it plays into it a bit as well. So it makes more sense for that game. I think obviously on ours, but I did like the leaderboard area, so I stole that one. I'll admit that. There are other things like the collectibles. That wasn't taken from Neon White. That's maybe just more of an inspiration from other kind of 3D platformers, like I don't know, like Mario and stuff, where you if I can't remember which specific games have it in, but you collect a collectible and then you'll unlock a bonus level that's a bit harder or a bit wacky. So it's kind of like if you want to engage a bit further and challenge yourself or push, kind of like get a bit more out of the game, you can engage by you can collect the collectibles and get more content. So it's basically like for anyone who doesn't care and doesn't want to collect the collectibles, fine. They probably wouldn't even enjoy the bonus stages in the first place. Then they probably just want to play the main story and finish the game, and they'll be happy with that. But for people who are kind of looking for to get more out of the game to push themselves a little bit more, uh, you can tying in the collectibles to that is kind of a fun way of doing it that rewards people engaging more. That doesn't like penalize you for not engaging, I guess.
Speaking of story, what made you decide that you wanted to go for a really like tongue-in-cheek type of story with a lot of jokey, quippy dialogue?
Um, uh, it's probably a two-part thing. One, I I don't know if I am the best writer in the world. I would say I, it doesn't necessarily excite me to write the most in-depth kind of like dramatic story, shall we say? And I honestly, if I think of a joke, I just cannot help myself put it in my games. Like the bus, for example, I just thought it was funny, and I'm like, well, that I've got to put that in the game now. So if I thought of something funny, I'm like, well, I've just got to put it in the games, and I've got to put it in the story. It's just kind of who I am. I feel like even if the jokes aren't funny to other people, if it makes me laugh, I enjoy putting them in. The other thing is the game's not it's one of the things I actually really don't like about Neon White is I feel like the story is almost like antithetical to the main part of the game. the main game part of the game is all about like going really quickly, setting cool times, and it's then you get like stuck in the menu for ages, just clicking through this long story, and I'm like, I don't, I just wanna run around and jump and do cool moves, and I think there's the reason I included some stories. I definitely think there's a nice thing to slow down the pace just for half a second, give you a bit of breathing room before you take on the next level. But I really do hate it in a game that's all about going quick, like kind of really going too heavy on the story. I think it would make the game worse, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't. I think it's almost universal. I've never heard anyone compliment Neon White's dialogue. Although I heard it was going for like an early 2000s, like lol so random, like trying to capture that vibe,
I
which is like, I don't know.
I think there's like a subset of people who are like, yeah, this clicks with me, who do enjoy it, and I'm kind of like fair enough if that's like what they wanted to write as the story. I no shade on that. That you gotta write what you feel is connects with you. But also, I think they understood probably before releasing it that a lot of people wouldn't connect with it. I don't think they would have been surprised by that. Um, and to be fair, the same with me with Kickbusters. That's why I kept the story light and also kept it so you could, even if you don't want to read it, it's like you can get through it in like half a second if you just spam click, or you can even turn it off in the options, because I was like, some people they might even want to go a step further. Um, but for me, I feel like it's nice to do something with a story to say something, even if it's not much of something, even if it's just a few jokes and a light story. I think it adds a little bit to the
I know I watched the damn, what is the Second Wind? They
right.
one of their 3-minute reviews commented that they really enjoyed Kick Bastards, but the tongue-in-cheek dialogue was a little much for them. But I really, actually, really liked it. Particularly when the devil winks at the camera, and you're like, "You already did that. You can't do that." Or I did when the bus said, "I'm a bus," it just ran me over. I just paused the game, let myself die practically, and then put in my notes, "I'm a bus" to keep playing because it just made me laugh so hard.
Yeah. Um, to be fair to them, the story was like I did actually make some tweaks to the story post launch, um, just because I was like, I could do a bit better. I could put a couple more jokes in here. And one thing I did as well was originally the game had a few more swear words in it, which I think like when I reflected on that, I was like, I think I still think that's funny to I don't know, maybe I'm just a child. Swearing sometimes just can be funny to me, but I appreciate for me, I was like, oh no, that's like a straight big turn off to some people. Like some people really hate that. And I was like, do I want people to hate my game because of a few swear words? And I was like, I'm not really that invested in the swear words in the story. So I think for that, that's probably some part of why he didn't enjoy it specifically. Also, it's my humor is like a bit of a dumb humor anyway. It probably doesn't connect with people
If I rem
regardless.
if I remember, it's just like it wasn't so much like, "Oh, this is bad." It was just more like, "Didn't do anything for me." And then that's just like a note like if this humor works for you, it's a plus. If it doesn't work for you, that's small enough that you can ignore, which is exactly what you were going for.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, basically, I wanted people who had my sense of humor to have a few laughs along the way, and that was what I was going for. Um,
It definitely
I've,
motivated me because I really wanted to kick the devil in the face.
yeah, yeah. I think probably some of the jokes that are like in the game, as in like not in the story, but like embedded into the game, like the boss probably land a bit more for more people, to be honest. And like the like devil joke at the end of him being like so tiny and pathetic. Um, I think those kind of jokes probably because they're kind of integrated into the game a bit better. Probably more people kind of enjoy them a bit more, but hey.
Were you at all concerned about, because it's a really small runtime, and I'm not really like how do I put this? I'm not exactly gonna go back and try to get the best times. I just kind of play through the story and like that was great, and then I'm done. But some people will definitely do that. Are you worried that some people will go through, beat the story, and be like, "That was great," and just hit the refund button?
Yeah, honestly, to some extent, yeah. I think I would say my impression of the refund system and small games is that if you play through the game and you've had fun, even if it's a bit short of 2 hours, you're probably going to be like, cool, and then not refund it. If you play the game for 2 hours and are really frustrated by it or something, like maybe you have a bad experience on the last few levels, for example, I could see people refunding it then. Um, it's hard to say for sure. I the runtime is about 2 hours. I think if you play through the story, I think maybe if you play it a little bit quicker, it's a little bit less than 2 hours, like maybe an hour 40 or something. If you play it a bit slower, it will just be over 2 hours, I think. Um, if you try and get any of the medals, I think you go over 2 hours. It just is what it is. I'm not. I was aware of it before launch, and it was just like it is what it is. I think the problem with this game is the amount of content in the game is actually quite a lot. But because you play through it really quickly, it seems like not a lot. It seems the resulting runtime's really short, but there's not really much I could do about that because even if there was 100 levels, it would get over the 2 hours probably, but uh, the levels take quite a bit of time to make because I think when you compare it to some similar games, like what's it called? It's called there's a game called Cyberhook. Um, I don't know. There are a few others that I can't think of off the top of my head that are made by like small teams, and they have very undetailed worlds, um, which means they can produce levels a lot quicker. But actually, the levels in Kick Bastards have quite a lot of detail in them, despite the kind of low poly style. There's like, if you look at a corner, there's like a load of objects that are specifically placed, and um, that all takes time. I think, in my opinion, it's worth it because it makes the game look better. It actually also improves play of the game. I think having like kind of weird little bits and bobs that you can do weird kind of movement tricks off actually improves the speedrunning of the game. Um, it definitely opens up more routes and kind of more weird tech that I think is kind of really interesting, personally. And I definitely like the players who have played the game the most. It definitely you see them do some weird tricks and stuff, and I think it works out. Um, so basically, there's nothing I could do. Uh, it just is what it is.
I always sometimes feel bad asking devs like, "Hey, how does it feel that someone could just refund your game?" But like, I also like would like the devs to be able to voice like concerns about the Steam refund policy because it's not perfect, but I remember back in the day, I think it was Arkham Knight when it first released on PC. It was one of the Arkham games, and it was so broken that was around when the Steam refund policy came out, and everyone was like, "Thank God," because the port was just fucking busted. I remember it was like bad.
Yeah,
Um,
I think I think in the ideal world there would be a way to tag the runtime of your game on Steam and have that affect the length of time you have to refund it. I think the issue is Steam doesn't I don't think they have the bandwidth to they don't have the bandwidth to fully play through a game. They do some basic tests on the game to make sure they're not uploading a game that won't load or a, is a complete scam or something, like a really obvious scam or something.
looking at you the day before.
Right. Well, okay. Well, I don't even think it checks for that level of scam, to be honest. I think it's more like, it says it's one thing and you open it up and it's just like a menu or something. There's nothing there. Like they do like the actual bare minimum. But like if they had to play through hours and hours of game just to verify the length of the game, I don't know that they particularly want to do that. But I think that's the only real solution to it. Because if you could tag a game as either the runtime or if I was like to be like, so players know obviously, so it'd say like, oh, this is a, like there'd be a tag that was like, this is a sub like a 2 hour game, or this the main story has a runtime of 2 hours or something. The refund policy only, and then it tells you the refund only is for only half an hour or something. Then it would fix the issue. But as I say, I think I'm not too worried about it personally, because I do think that, as I say, if you have a good time with the game, the majority of people, I think I've seen some data as well to behind this. The majority of people don't then refund it. Like, so I don't. I think it's one of these. This seems a bit more like an issue than it actually is. I think there are, I say, like a bit more risks to being under 2 hours, as in like if you have a frustrating ending, like in like a 3 hour game, the overall impression might be like, oh, that was still a good game, it had a frustrating ending. But in a 2 hour game, it's like, oh, that game had a frustrating ending. Maybe I'll refund it. So there is a risk, but um, yeah, I don't think it's too bad.
What's been the most insane thing you've seen someone do with your game when it comes to speedrunning?
um, honestly, it's hard to pick out something specific. We got a Discord and people post clips on there occasionally. Honestly, I straight up look at the clips. I'm like, I know exactly how everything works in this game, and I'm like, I cannot physically see how you could do that. Like, I know that the game's mechanics allow for it. I'm like, oh, it's not broken. It works. But like, if I were to replicate it, there's literally no way I could replicate it. And honestly, people do that. Post clips, literally, like they have been posting pretty regularly clips that I'm like, I don't know. And then I've gone on. Tried to play the game a little bit, so I understand the kind of speedrunning experience, and try and compete for the leaderboards. I I could not get top 3 on basically any level. It like full stop. Like, and I would say in general, I would say I'm pretty good at games, compared to say a lot of devs, even at their own games. I'm pretty good at my own game as well. On top of that, because I've been playing it for years, and even still, people easily eclipse me. It's more about like, it's hard to say there's like a specific one thing, because it's more about like the tempo, I would say, of movement. So like similar to like if you see like, people who are like top players in StarCraft, right? One of the measures of their kind of it's not really a measure of their skill, but it kind of like, if they're skillful, they tend to have like a really high APM, like actions per minute, right? Like you'll see, like they have like 400 actions per minute. They're doing like so much on the map. It's kind of similar in Kickbusters, right? If you're really good at the game, you're like hammering inputs. You're doing like a war on fire, like a quarter of a second, then you're flipping around doing a kick, and like so much is happening so quickly to like all combo together to get higher speed. Um, so yeah, it's more like it's like this gradual rise up to like this high skill, rather than being like there's like a flick over and there's a thing you can do when you're that high skill. There's like one move or something. Um, yeah.
What about, have you seen any glitch speedruns? Because I've seen where someone in Doom, if they jump on a specific like part and they use the weapon wheel at a certain moment, their character can shoot up so fast they break through the skybox, and then they can just skip whole levels. Has anyone
Right.
been able to do stuff with your game like that?
There is well, there's a, there's been a few glitches in the game. There's been a couple that we've patched. I'm always a bit with patching glitches. I try to think about it in terms of, is the glitch impacting, say, a regular player's experience at any point? Um, Because if it isn't, if it's like you have to do some weird thing or like kind of like be good to do this glitch, I'm like, we should just leave that in. It's kind of fun, right? It's cool to be able to break the game. But if it's like there's some things that kind of break the player experience, or actually, to be fair, there's another category which is if it's technically a speedrun strat, but it's really, really not fun to do. Like like doing the glitch sucks. Like like
Oh,
you gotta like hammer the keyboard so hard or something. There's like painful or whatever, something like that. Then I'd patch that. So there have been a few glitches that kind of fall into the first category where like the kind of way you're abusing the glitch is kind of maybe a higher level thing, but actually did impact kind of normal players as well. So I fixed them. And there was one specifically which um, it gave you quite a big speed boost. Like basically, there was a trick that like let you go up kind of gentle slopes in the game and get like a mega speed boost off them. Because normally when you like play the game, if you do a slide and you slide up a slope, you slow down. Like kind of using this trick, it would like almost like do the opposite. You get like hyper boosted. So I fixed that one because it was like literally everyone in the player base was telling me that they'd hated doing it. So I was like, okay, yeah, I better fix that. But for example, there is one glitch I know in the game at the moment, which is you can do there's a climb up move in the game, which basically just kind of it's like a mantle in like Doom or whatever. Technically you can clip through roofs doing it at the moment, but it's a little bit tricky to do and you need to know what you're doing and it doesn't impact the normal play experience. Like you couldn't do it accidentally. So I have left that one in and there are a couple level skips that are just like, yeah, they just like go from the start of the game, start of the level to the end of the level in like a second. And I'm like, all right, fair enough.
oh man. Um, yeah, I like watching specifically the developer commentary on speedruns. Um, it's always really funny because sometimes their hearts break in the way that they're like, "Oh yeah, I made that whole cutscene," and they'll never see that now. uh,
I think because it's a speedrunning game I'm making, like I know in advance that people are going to do that. Like people break every game possible. All games have like these weird glitches in, but when it's a speedrunning game, people are going to try their hardest to break it. So I was like mentally prepared in advance, so I wasn't too hurt by seeing them break it a bit.
I do. I'm not. I don't try very hard, but I'm like, yeah, I'll try to get some fast track records on like Mario Kart, and then I'll see like the tips and tricks that people are doing, especially for the Wii version, and it'll just be like, yeah, I just like turned the very first corner of the track, glitched back to the finish line, and I completed the whole race in 5 seconds.
Yeah, yeah. I remember. I think I watched a similar one on a similar like video about how someone got the speedrun world record in like Mario Kart and just genuinely ridiculous kind of stuff. And I think that's the kind those kind of glitches tend to only be found once a game's been out for a very long time and has quite a good player base for a long time. Um, so yeah, I don't think anything like that is in Kickbusters just yet.
What was your philosophy behind how you hide all your little collectibles in each level?
Um, it's a mix between two things, I'd say. First of all, sometimes I'm like, I think it would just be fun to have to try and get to a certain spot. Um, like I can see like there's a fun little route that you have to use to get up to that spot. Usually I do it like or after I've done the level. Like I don't tend to build the levels with too much consideration about where the collectible goes. I'll sometimes like make adjustments to the level for it. Um, but my main strategy was um, actually, there's also a couple ones that are like um, kind of like easy ones to get, just because I want people to like learn about what the collectibles are and what they do. But I'll try to do them in a way that made you use the mechanics in a bit of a different way if you've been playing the game without like really trying to use the full set of mechanics. So you might have to use the wall kick and the wall running combination in a kind of like not too tricky way, but a little bit of a way that maybe you could avoid using in the main game. So it was kind of to try and push people to learn mechanics that they may not have otherwise been using, and then maybe and they think about that and then maybe try and go, oh, actually, I could get a better time in this level or this set of levels if I just did this move.
And how did you come up with the aesthetic from Kick Bastards? Did you make a lot of the assets yourself, or was it a matter of did you find the assets and then start building levels around what you found?
So the only assets I didn't make were the skeleton, the wizard, and um like big Hell Knight guy at the end of the level.
And the frog?
Oh, and the and the frog guy. uh, the rest I modeled myself. Yeah. It's basically just I'm not the highest skill artist in the world. So it's kind of working to my limitations. I think I'm pretty good at like, knowing kind of some of the fundamentals about art, like visual arts in general. So like, composition, color theory, all that kind of stuff. So I can create an art style reasonably well, but I'm maybe not the best 3D modeler. So I'm avoiding, like, I wanted to avoid doing like, like realistic models. That's why a lot of the models in the game and kind of the art style in general is kind of based on this low poly, is because it's kind of working within my limitations. But I still wanted to have this like strong kind of visual identity. I think a lot of low poly games, especially ones that use asset packs, to be honest, can kind of fall into this like generic look that sorry, give me a second. Sorry about that.
No, it's all good.
Just trying to speak in my throat, it's like getting all tickly. What's the thing? Yeah, they can fall into this kind of generic style that is very like very easy to ignore when you're sitting clips of them. So I just wanted to do something a bit different to that. That stood out a bit more. So I chose like this kind of limited color palette and went with that. Yeah.
And then, oh, sorry, you got it's tickled throat, and I got a yawn here coming. Mm. Okay, who would win in a fight? The protagonist of Kick Bastards or the protagonist of Angerfoot?
Obviously Angerfoot's not out yet, so he may have abilities that I'm unaware of. But having played the what was it, the little like itch demo they had before they like fully committed to making the game, the jam version of it, he could just kick doors and shoot guys. I think kick bastard guy would win. Do you see how far he kicks the skeletons? And like how much like he could like fly across the world like with his movement powers? I'm pretty sure he'd win.
Can't
Pretty easily as well.
guy just like shoot him?
I have a feeling Kick Bastard's guy would be impervious to bullets. He isn't. I haven't narratively decided that, but he gives me that impression.
Impervious to bullets, but not fireballs.
Well, fireballs are, I don't know, bigger.
Okay, so Angerfoot with pistol loses, but Angerfoot with like a 50 cal sniper rifle, possible winner.
Possible way.
All right, that's what we're gonna settle on. Angerfoot just has to bring the right anti-material rifle to the fight.
Yeah.
So I think that's all of my questions, Ian. So thank you for being on. Is there anything that you want to shout out? Any type of links? Maybe your Discord. I had one person shout out a local pizza place.
Right. Just shout out to Kick Bastards. You should go play if you listen to this whole podcast and you don't hate the sound of the game. You should probably buy it because I need the money. Thanks everyone. Other than that, yeah, check out I'm on Twitter and we've got a Discord if you wanna. I also have some devlogs on YouTube and stuff, although admittedly I haven't posted on there in a long time, so I'll need to get on that. But yeah, that's basically where I am.
Well, thanks for being on. Even though I'm yawning through that, I know that did not sound sincere, but thanks for being on. And yeah, so anyone who's listening, feel free to listen. Obviously, this is going to be on YouTube, but also on Spotify and a few other platforms. You can find out what those platforms are on Podbean because I forgot. And if you want to reach out to me, I am on Threads, Blue Sky, and Twitter, but I'm mostly on Twitter, the Hell site. And yeah, I also have a link tree that's going to be in the description that's going to have my Ko-Fi if you want to support the podcast. And I think that's everything. Bye.